I am happy to get our discussion started. Greetings from New York for all our speakers and attendees joining us today. It is noon in New York and 5:30 p.m. in London and 8:30 p.m. in Dubai. These are just different time zones that we try to accommodate. For those who doesn't know me, I am co-chair of CTBUH Future Leaders Committee Global and had been involved with the committee since 2015. I'm an architectural technologist and the founder of GenX Design Technology, which is an innovation hub for professionals in AEC, focusing on advanced technology and industry-based research. I'm honored to be moderating today's program. With that, I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of CTBUH and Future Leaders Committee for all local chapters. I also like to take a moment to thank those who helped us get this event together. CTBUH team Heather Spray, Tanya Amadei, FLC New York team, and special thanks go to Can Gazioglu from Deloitte and Arpan Bakshi from Foster & Partners to help organize this event. I would like to summarize our program outline for you before we get started. This program is recorded and will be available at our YouTube channel. All attendees' microphones are muted, so if you have questions during the presentations, please feel free to submit them by using QA as shown here. It is located at the bottom of your Zoom windows. We will try to cover as much questions as possible at the end. Before introducing our speakers, I'd like to cover a few items regarding to CTBUH. Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat is a nonprofit, multidisciplinary worldwide trade association that serves as the world's leading resource for professionals focused on design to operations of tall buildings and sustainable cities. CTBUH member network includes 2 million individuals and over 10,000 offices around the world. Finally, I'd like to invite you to join Future Leaders Committee in your region. Help us foster interdisciplinary collaboration globally. All right, without further ado, I'd like to get our program started. Our speakers today, Alessandro Ranaldi, Partner Head of Workplace Consultancy, Foster & Partners, based in London. Mohinder Singh, Senior Manager of Infrastructure and Capital Projects from Deloitte, New York City. Omur, Ehliz, Project Executive from Turner Construction, New York City again. So our first speaker will be Alessandro Ranaldi. Alessandro is Head of Workplace Consultancy at Foster Partners with more than 25 years experience in place and 25 years experience in workplace strategy, real estate and design. He has worked with leadership teams of some of the top Fortune 500 companies to help them create a vision with ownership and changes to the workplace and behaviors to improve colleague experience, engagement, and business performance. Alessandro, you have the stage.
Thank you very much. I will start by saying that there is a lot of discussion that we see currently on the media. We are bombarded by a lot of articles on what is the impact of COVID-19 in our life, in our workplace, in the design of our building moving forward. I think that the discussion is very much polarized. In reality, we have noticed that the impact of COVID in our society has done nothing else but fast tracking a paradigm shift that was already there, and in how we work, in how we live, and in how we play in the 21st century. And we have been anticipating that. So the interesting thing is that we anticipated a tech disruption, for instance, that have changed the way we work, and have also helped us to support better the increased work mobility that is happening currently in the workplace scene. We also understood and we learned maybe that the terrorist office model that was based on very measurable productivity and control over the employees does not long work in a society that is very much based on a transactional knowledge economy. The technology at the same time now is really allowing us to be simultaneously in the same physical and virtual space. And this has created a greater choice also for employees. And we are assisting to what we call a liquid workforce. There is the tendency to move easily from one employer to another. There is a lot of mobility, especially in the younger generation, because they want to learn more, and they are having access to a global market of work and jobs that they didn't have before. At the same time, the hyper flexibility that is requested from the younger generation is also requested on the corporate world side. In response to the ever-changing market, and the cycle of the changes in the market are very fast. So that's a very strong way for the organization to respond to these needs. As a result of that, we also assist to a research that is predicting that 13% of the employees are actively disengaged, and the war for talents in this digital world is quite strong. So the question is, how do we make sure that we are able to attract and retain talent in a digital and dispersed workforce? And moving on to the next slide, Ilkay. It's important to understand at this point in time what is it that we actually really learned from the current situation and from this shift. And most importantly, is there a way that we can capitalize on the lesson learned during this pandemic? I think that, for instance, we learned one very important aspect of our work life. We learned that working from home actually works. And that is a quite major breakthrough for a lot of management in large corporate companies. They were quite skeptical about having to work in a dispersed workforce scenario. And it's simply because they weren't trained, it wasn't natural for them to work in this situation. At the same time, we also learned that we have blurring boundaries now between work life and personal lives, and this is facilitated by the technology. People are also benefiting significantly from less commuting. There has been a research that shows that 80% of remote workers experience less job stress than other workers. And this means that we have a very, very substantial increase in the health and well-being factor of our workers. And, you know, not to mention, of course, the impact on the environment. If we look at what happens in the city of London and in London in general, we have 6.1 million jobs only in an area that is 1.5% of London's area. And 25% of all jobs are in Westminster and the city. This means that there is a hyper concentration of the jobs, and we have almost 7.5 jobs for every household in the central area. So this created, of course, a lot of discrepancy and a lot of need of movement of the workforce concentrated in one small area that is absolutely congested in London. And this is not a sustainable way to live our cities, probably. We can go to the next slide. We know at the same time that in the office, we did used to go for 4 major activities and or work modes, as we call it. One is to do focus work. One is to learn, actually, and a lot is to also collaborate and create innovation. And then one often underestimated part is the social part, which is an important aspect of our work life. In this whole scenario, we also learn the benefit, but also the risks that are connected to that one. And there is the risk that, for instance, we are more and more detached as a team. And now that we are living quite often in a lockdown situation, we realize how much actually we gave for granted during our period of working in the office. We gave for granted the possibility to immediately connect with our team, collaborate. And the organizational psychologist, Adam Grant, Wharton, from the Wharton University, analyze the situation and realize that once the COVID situation will be over, most probably team will be closer than ever before, and that will be an important aspect of coming back to our office. So how do we design a meaningful workplace, a more resilient building, and rethink the future of our city and infrastructure moving forward? Well, first of all, the most important thing is to remember that we don't have to design for the COVID period. We really have to design thinking beyond, and thinking of designing for creating more resilient workplace, more resilient building, more resilient city to all sorts of different events that we'll be facing in the future, because we learned the lesson that we were called highly unprepared to this event, and we cannot afford in our society and with the economy to have another one of these events, and that gets us completely unprepared. The reassuring thing in this whole constellation is that in reality the office is here to remain. We learn the importance of the office much more than ever before, because it's also an organizational tool to really retain and attract the talents, if the quality of the office is sufficiently good to make sure that it becomes a destination. To use the words of Jeremy Mearson, the director of WorkTech Academy, the office will be more and more of a place where people collaborate, share ideas, get trained, and most importantly are mentored. And it will be very much of a human landscape. From the side of the developers, it's important to understand that developers need to finally embrace the need, the speed of change. And this is an important aspect also for the landlords. They need to invest on quality, increase the technology, embed in a seamless technological experience in our building, make sure that the flexibility is there, and the variety of amenities offering is significantly higher than has ever been before. Companies are also potentially looking forward into the future, try to open more regional hub rather than having centralized location only. And this will provide, means that they will provide potentially also access to co-working areas. And this will have a side effect to reduce drastically the utilization of public transport, but also of private transport, and create a much better livable city that is less congested by private transportation or motorized transportation. Building design needs also to contemplate the high possibility that we might change the use over time much more frequently than has ever been before, and ultimately the positive impact of this revised city will be in gain in the well-being, in gain for the environment, and this will be achieved even simply by reducing significantly the commuting and the traveling to our centralized office. I would like finally to close with the fact that as we are planning our return to the office in the attempt to save the economies of our society, the real hidden risk in reality seems to be less related to the COVID-19, which I'm confident that in a way or the other we will get over this pandemic as we did in the past centuries. But the real risk is that actually we might forget too soon and go back to the old normal. Thank you.
Oh, I was mute. Thank you so much, Alessandro. You gave so much information and a great overview in 10 minutes. That was fantastic. And our next speaker is Mohinder Singh, Senior Manager of Infrastructure and Capital Projects from Deloitte, and also based in New York City. Mohinder is Mohinder has close to 20 years of experience in the construction industry, providing strategic advisory services across the full cycle of capital projects. He specializes in leveraging the use of tools and technology to optimize project delivery through enhanced control streamlined process, and accurate reporting. Mohinder, now it's yours. We are looking forward to listen to your presentation.
All right, thank you, Ilkay. Thank you for the glorious introduction. I don't think I'm half of as impressive as you make me sound, but yeah, a little bit about myself. About 20 years in the construction industry. Have worked on both sides on the project delivery as a project manager now, on the owner side and providing strategic advice to the owner community on managing and starting up large capital programs or capital projects, so to speak. Before I get into the presentation, I just wanted to give a quick overview of Deloitte and our practice as a whole. So we provide advisory services to our clients throughout the life cycle of a capital program. So anywhere from the project initiation stage, when the owners are thinking about the different financing strategies or funding strategies, and what may be available for them to fund the project, all the way to the planning and execution of the project, helping them come up with the contracting strategy, what kind of delivery strategy you would need to make the project a success. Whether you want to go with some of the alternate delivery models that are more prevalent now than they were before, and then throughout the execution phase. So, at a very high level nutshell, we provide services across the life cycle, and that really gives us the vantage point to be able to see some of the trends that we are seeing in the construction industry. It helps us to predict what the future is going to look like because of some of the impacts that the industry is facing, and some of the things that we are seeing that may mature in the short term or long term basis. So with that kind of vantage, we put together some thoughts, some opinions on what we are seeing, especially here in the U.S. as it relates to construction industry. And the biggest impact, obviously, that the industry is facing right now is because of COVID-19. As you can see, pretty much the whole of the country was impacted by COVID, and especially the construction industry. Some states more than the others. Some states completely shut down construction projects and they were deemed as non-essential, while others deemed construction as an essential activity and kept the construction projects ongoing. Regardless of where the state stood, there was impact to the actual job site. There was some, safety concerns and health and safety issues that had an impact on the construction projects. At a high level, as you can see, a lot of states are moving back to a state of new normal, where construction activities are picking up, where the ban on construction has been lifted. This data that you see is actually a week old. We are getting new executive orders from the governors of different states almost on a daily basis. So it's a very fluid situation and something that's changing. What we wanted to, one of the things that we are seeing is, the impact that COVID is going to have, and I broke it down into three levels. The impact on the people side of construction, how it's going to impact our workforce and people who work in the construction industry, the impact that projects are going to have, and then overall construction as a business, what kind of impacts we're going to have. So I'll get into each one of these in at a high level of detail. From a people standpoint, we're seeing a lot of impact because of the safety issues and the productivity issues that COVID has presented to the industry. As you can well imagine, now there's more restrictions on what kind of distance between workers should be there, and how you cannot crowd the workspace with multiple trades at the same time, which was the norm earlier. So because of that, there's some productivity issues, and your construction projects are not as productive as they used to be. The labor is not as productive as it is. Because of that, there is going to be some renegotiating of labor agreements, labor rates. That's something that's going to happen in a near-term basis. We're also seeing, because of the shutdown, availability of labor and skilled labor is going to have an impact. A little later in the presentation, I'll also show you how something similar was witnessed a few years ago and what kind of impact it had on skilled labor. But that's something that we see already, that labor availability is going to be an issue. The project as a whole, we're seeing acceleration in advancement of technology in the delivery of projects. So that is something, as a trend, we had started seeing that a lot of owners are mandating use of technology to manage their projects. There's a lot more usage of technology, whether that's on the design side, like Alessandro was mentioning, but also on the actual execution of the project. So we see that some of that may be accelerated because of COVID, because of lack of availability of skilled labor, and in general because of productivity issues. So a lot of off-site manufacturing of materials, prefabrication, modular construction is going to happen. There's going to be some impact from a technology standpoint on advancement of project management systems. So as an industry, we've been laggards in adoption of technology. Which we are seeing that it's actually going to start accelerating. So people are going to move out of using Excel spreadsheets to manage projects. There's going to be project management information systems that will be adopted. I think Omur is going to talk a little bit about some of the regulatory changes that are going to happen, and we're already seeing that on a short term. Whether that's availability of permits or variances, and how quickly you can get them, or what the governments are doing to advance some of these capital projects. The industry as a whole, I think, is going to have a pretty big impact because of COVID. We're already seeing some M&A activity happening, some consolidation happening in the industry, which was already a big trend that we were witnessing prior to COVID. So there was a lot of mergers that were happening and consolidation that was happening, which is going to get even further consolidated because of COVID-19. We see some of the smaller firms that may not be financially viable after this COVID situation lifts. The COVID ban put quite a bit of stress on the financial viability of a lot of firms, and the ones that can sustain it will come out of it. The ones that could not sustain it or were over leveraged in the business may have some troubles getting back on board. Alternate project delivery is concepts have been around for quite a while, but have not been adopted very significantly in the construction industry. We see that changing, especially in certain sectors than the others. Healthcare, for example, and infrastructure, I think is going to have a trend where alternate project delivery, whether that's public-private partnership kind of projects or integrated project delivery kind of delivery models, that will tend to be adopted more favorably than the others. There is going to be some strain and some stricter financial requirements because of COVID-19, especially as it relates to bonds and insurance. The insurance companies faced or are going to face the brunt of this because of COVID-19. There's going to be defaults. There's going to be a lot of firms that are not able to complete their construction projects, and the insurance companies step in, which is going to put a lot of strain on them as well. So you will see some stricter financial requirements as far as the companies are concerned. It's important to look at the past to kind of predict what the future looks like. I mentioned a little earlier about things that we've seen in the past, and here we've gone back and pulled some data around what was the impact of the construction industry during the recession period from 2007 to almost 2011. And how it impacted the construction industry. As you can see, on a short-term basis, there was a decrease in total number of people who were employed in the construction industry. So that's where the skilled labor or lack of availability of skilled labor comes into play. That's a trend that was witnessed back then. We also saw the total number of firms in the U.S. There was a gradual decrease in the total number of firms, and that was a direct play of firms that were not able to sustain themselves during the recession period, or there were firms that got acquired or became part of larger firms, and there was a lot of merger and acquisition activity that was happening. So that's kind of what was witnessed in the past, and the way that this trend is, and depending upon how long the situation lasts and the impact that situation will have, you can almost predict a similar kind of scenario. The highlight here is, if there is a light at the end of the tunnel, is that the firms that came out of this recession were able to grow at a much faster pace than they were growing prior to the recession. So that's something that that's a bright spot if there is in this situation. And again, as projects begin, there's going to be a lot more emphasis on the procurement side of things. Looking at the project team, the vendors, the subcontractors, and looking at how robust these vendors and subcontractors are, whether that's from a financial standpoint or current workload and the quality of their bondage. So that's something that we predict is going to happen based on what we saw in the past. Lastly, I want to touch upon the cost of some of these variables. So as you can see, there's going to be some increased cost, and some opportunities in the near term and the long term. And it kind of summarizes pretty much what I spoke about earlier. I'm hearing a little bit of background noise, but in a nutshell, you'll see because of automation, because of technology, there's going to be some opportunities, some increased productivity, and opportunities to decrease costs. While on the other side, there is going to be reduction in productivity because of whether that's availability of skilled labor or financial viability. Some of the things that we already spoke about or presented. So that's where we see things happening, and it's a very fluid situation, and as things start crystallizing a little further, some of these trends will start materializing as well. So with that, I would like to pass it back to Ilkay.
Thank you so much, Mohinder. Great presentation, really. Our next speaker will be Omur Ehliz, project executive from Turner Construction. Omur also has 20 years of construction experience and project management expertise to collaborate with leading healthcare and research systems such as Columbia University, NYU, Langone Health. Omur, please take away and introduce yourself a little bit further. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Ilkay, and good afternoon, everyone. For the ones that are in the US, and good evening for the ones on the other side of the pond. As Ilkay introduced, my name is Omur Ehliz. I'm a project executive with Turner Construction in New York City business unit. A little bit of my background. I have an architectural degree from Istanbul, Turkey, and a master's degree in construction management from Clemson in the US. Since I graduated, I worked in construction and southeast of US and then New York City. I've been in New York for last 15 years mainly on a healthcare projects and commercial buildings like World Trade Center and Tupan Plaza are some of the projects that I have going on. As Mohinder mentioned about, let's go to the next slide, please. As Mohinder mentioned that, late March, we received an executive order from the governor of New York State that all non-essential projects had to be shut down due to COVID reasons. And it was due to the safety of the workers and safety of the public in New York City. And then it was a hit for all of us. So that means 90% of our projects in New York City, we had to keep everyone working from home. And we have 1,200 people, just engineers and superintendent and estimators. And this doesn't count the workforce that we subcontract to build our projects. So, and then it was a big change for the industry. And since then we had multiple meetings with the union laborers and other construction firms to understand what are the things that we have to do to start our construction projects. And then we submitted different variances to the government, and some of the projects deemed as essential. And then for the last 5 weeks, some of the projects are open, but right now our 70% of the projects are open at a limited basis. The other projects are still shut down. And we feel that and probably in the next 2 weeks that we will receive another executive order so that we can start the construction sites. So I'm going to mention about what are the things that we've done in a short term to mitigate some of the COVID-related issues on our construction site. And again, this is a fluid thing that as we are learning as we go, and some of the things that we're finding out and then it doesn't apply in the next week. So we keep changing it, all these guidelines that we have in our construction sites. So one of the things that is very essential for the safety of our workers is the physical distancing and keeping 6 feet social distancing. I mean, in New York, as you know, we're lack of land. All our projects are going vertical, and some of the high-rise projects that we have like 1,200 people working in there. And then having them and keeping the 6 feet social distancing, it's a big challenge. So we start working with the labor unions, and then we come up with the different start dates and start times, and then shifting the workforce like we started doing the second shifts, even the third shifts. And then we start staggering the workforce, trying to mitigate it. And again, these projects are still on a limited basis. So once we have 1,200 people come into work, and that's going to be a challenge that we're going to be facing in the near future. And the same thing for these high-rise buildings, and vertical transportation is critical to transport our workforce into the building to the work areas, and the number of the hoist cars or the elevators, the service cars, and then keeping them with the social distancing in the elevator cars is going to be a challenge. So that's what we're working on with the labor unions to come up with an ideal solution. And the health and the hygiene is the big thing. So we start implementing a lot of wash stations in our construction sites so that, each workers can go in there and then wash their hands before and after the work. And one of the things started it, and then this became a law in New York City Department of Building, is the temperature scanning. What it means is whoever comes into the construction site needs to be scanned for their temperature. And if that person has a high fever, and that worker will not be allowed to the site. And that obviously add another logistical problem for us as everyone's coming into our construction site. Now we have another bottleneck to bring our construction people in and out of our projects. And the rules is when you have the symptoms of COVID-like symptoms, you have to stay home. We give out the questionnaires to all our construction workers before they enter the site. If any symptoms that they have, we keep all our construction workers outside. And also periodically, on a daily basis, we have labor force cleaning and disinfecting all the commonly used areas, like all the door handles, all the hallways, like the bathrooms and the elevators, the hoists. And then these areas are frequently disinfecting by our special contractors. And one of the things also that was implemented in New York City is the new PPE, which is the mask. Now the mask is a required PPE for all construction workers. So everyone must wear either N95 or KN95, and it depends on the type of the work. But no one will be allowed to our construction site without a proper PPE. Let's go to the next slide. So as I mentioned it, you know, for the jobs that have been opened in New York City, DOB issued a new mandate that the mask and the face coverings are going to be a part of the tool of your work. Means that, you know, you cannot work in a construction site without a hard hat, the same as the face mask, that if you do not have it, you're not going to be allowed into the job sites. Let's go to the next slide. And this is a kind of what we have going on in each construction sites, that we have areas that we line up the construction workers. We have some medics that is employed at each entrance, and then we scan each of the employees for their temperatures, and then also that we conduct surveys for each employees coming into our construction site. Next slide. So these are the pictures that we have ongoing on some of the sites. The next picture you saw it is the ID bracelet that we implemented on few of our jobs. Is whoever comes into the site, we give them an RFID bracelet, because in New York City there are lunch breaks and the coffee breaks and the smoke breaks that everyone has to leave the construction site because smoking is not allowed in the construction site. So there's a lot of in and out of traffic from the construction site. So we have RFID systems at our gates that whoever is scanned that day, and then that person doesn't have a high fever, is get a new RFID bracelet, so that person can go in and out freely with our turnstile systems. Next page. So what we learned as a company outside our construction site is our biggest asset is our people in Turner Construction. We don't have any trade workers. We have only engineers and superintendent and estimators. So when we were shut down by the governor late March, and our 1,200 employees in New York City had to work from home. And that was a new thing for us, because traditionally construction is a face-to-face business, and then it's so hard to work from home and remotely. But we learned how to adjust, and then as part of our lean and active caring culture, we started to implement surveys and fact-based problem-solving tools that we started to adjust our business so how we can accommodate our staff needs. And one of the things that we started to using is the giving out the freestanding office desks to our staff, because some of the surveys came out that, you know, they were complaining about the backaches. And now we have some jobs started. 20% of our staff is back to work. Still 80% of our staff is working from home, and we're conducting a bunch of surveys that's coming in. And the biggest issue that we're going to be seeing when all the constructions are open is the commuting, that everybody is complaining about the commuting systems, and then everybody's not comfortable using the public transportation. And in New York City, driving to New York City is going to be a big issue as far as the traffic and parking. So that's one of the challenges that we're currently working on, how we can bring other people to our work sites. Next slide. So at our company, we're always promoting innovation in construction. But in this COVID, and we see that these innovations and lean practices like prefabrication that Mohinder mentioned about is going to be used commonly on our projects. And I mean, we're already using virtual and augmented reality in our pre-construction phases and mock-up reviews and the coordination of our projects. We're going to start seeing this technology more in the construction sites as we will have less people working on the construction site, and then we're going to see this kind of technology used in the on-site job coordination with the design team and the quality inspections and that kind of stuff, since most of the design team and other members of the project team are working from home. And it's the same thing with the cloud-based laser scanning system. And we already see it. We use a robotic system with the cloud-based systems on laying out the buildings already. But we're going to see that more commonly used, as well as some of the robotic technology to use in the construction. Like we have a pilot project that is going on for robotic technology used in the elevator construction. But we're going to be seeing that more often to minimize the on-site labor force so that they can initiate these innovative solutions. And that's all for my presentation. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Omur. So for our attendees, please feel free to send us your questions. And in the meantime, I will ask one general question for speakers. And this question actually came also from attendee as well. Is what is the biggest lesson learned for your firm dealing with COVID the way it happened so quickly and so fast, unexpectedly? What is the biggest lesson learned for you and for your company? Whoever wants to go.
Well, I can jump in, and then obviously Omar and Ranaldi will have their own inputs. I think for us the biggest impact Omar mentioned was the people aspect of the business. At the end of the day, we are a company that values our talent very much so. People management and having to work remotely and the challenges that brings, and how to manage that was a big change for all of us. From a business standpoint, I think just adaptation to the changed business circumstances and business environment is something that we are dealing with. We are seeing a lot of projects getting delayed because of funding restrictions or freeze in funding, which is presenting opportunities on creative ways to fund and finance projects. So that's a change that we are seeing and adapting to that change. Lean management is another thing that we are seeing. A lot of owners want to do more with less. So whether that's through technology advancement and be able to manage and control projects better with limited number of workforce available. So that's just from my perspective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I want to add to that a bit. We've been investing a lot into lean technologies and safety as far as the active caring to our workers and all of the people that is working around us on the job sites. And we saw that was the greatest investment that we've done, because when it comes to the time like the pandemic, we saw how the people came on board and come up with a bunch of solutions to keep the business as usual. And we were so impressed with the participation that we had from our trade workers, because they were feeling part of the team also. Even though they don't work for Turner Construction, they're subcontracted to us. But because of the active caring, that they feel a part of the team, and then they've done everything that they can to come up with a solution so that we can keep our business.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Alessandro, would you like to add something?
Yes. Okay, here. I was just on mute. I didn't realize that. No, I think that I agree with what Omur was saying. For us, the biggest learning was we thought that we were unprepared, but the reality is that our staff, within literally 3 days, was up to an enormous performance. And this was really due to the advanced technology that we implemented, and we embraced already mobility and fostering partners in many regards. Obviously, it's an adapting journey to a situation that has nothing to do with smart working or with agile working. Yeah, it was a real emergency, so to say, but we responded extremely well. But I think that the most important learning for us as professional is that moving forward, as I say, we forecasted already some changes in our society, and we really need to design our cities, our buildings with resilience in mind. We have to make sure that we are ready for whatever event is coming, looking forward to the future, because these events have shaped our society and the way we design our buildings ever since centuries. And every additional pandemic or black swan event that happened has taught our society something. You know, the typical example was with the period in which there was the TB spreading that originated a lot of the architecture of the modern movement, like Gropius and so on, to design buildings that were white, clean, very well lit and with natural light and very well ventilated with natural ventilation. I think that this is just to bring a simple example of how resilience through time will learn how to design it and how to build it.
Perfect. Alessandro, actually going on the same topic, you mentioned today and actually yesterday as well, you know, workplace is changing, and so the building design has to change, and so that real estate developer has to also change what they have to focus on when they do these projects. Can you give us some specific examples of how to prepare buildings or new designs to work this new kind of workplaces? You also mentioned that this is not just specific to COVID, but the new generation of, you know, you said 30% is younger generation, so they don't have to be, they are more tech savvy, so they can work remotely. But also about buildings, you gave some interesting comments yesterday. I think like parking being used as labs, or what other different ways architects can utilize buildings?
Yes, yes. So, well, there are many different questions here. I think that starting with the building, I mentioned earlier that we need to really think as architects, as professionals, as engineers, as developers, and as landlords. We really need to start thinking of designing buildings that might change the use over time far more frequently than ever happened before. And I don't want to go down the line that our building have to be anonymous or don't have a character. We can still design really good quality building that have a character and have the required identity, so to say. But it's extremely important that moving forward to the future, you know, we take a look on, and a critical look on how we design the building and make sure that we embed as much as possible technology, construction system, and configuration of the core of the building, the shell and the core of the building, the shape of the floor plate, in order to accommodate a change in use over time. I mean, a lot of the high-rise building that we have been building in New York and Philadelphia already incorporate a lot of that dynamic, and it's very easy to see, for instance, in the Comcast building that incorporates inside a building in a building in Philadelphia. There are different uses throughout the entire building. This is a good example to start with, but it's not the only one. I think that there are very good examples across the world of other architecture that is doing the same. And this is an important aspect to make sure that we design resilient building moving forward to the future, and we save as much as possible of the real estate asset of our cities. Another important aspect that I mentioned is the fact that by decreasing the densities in our workplace, by creating also a more decentralized and spread hubs across the cities, we allow for people to use less transportation, both private and public transport. And this will ultimately decrease the quantity of space in the streets that we can reclaim to give it back to the public. And give it back to the public, it means increasing significantly the quality of our city and landscape environment. It means that we can basically, find alternative solution for the cars that needs to be parked, remove all the parking spaces for the street. It means doubling up, literally doubling up the amount of space that is given back to pedestrian. And this is a great gain for everyone.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. essentially we have to design smart buildings that can live further than their build time. Mohinder, we have another great question actually. I'm not sure if you're able to see it, but they're asking if the occupation density of office space reduces to accommodate social distancing rules, do you foresee rents, revenues, and landlords' expectations having to adjust accordingly? And will that affect how large projects are funded?
You know, I did look at that question. It's a very interesting question. And so, you know, I think I'll start off by answering that. This right now is a very fluid situation. So, you know, nothing, you know, there's, you know, we haven't started seeing, you know, these kinds of trends where, you know, the owner is actually demanding that, you know, reconfigure my office space and make it more, you know, compliant with, you know, health and safety, you know, guidance, you know, because there really are no requirements as such. So if, you know, that situation arises where there are, you know, guidance issued or, you know, by the regulatory authorities, then, you know, then that is something that will happen, and, you know, reconfiguration of space will happen. This will certainly have an impact on the density of the office space. You know, right now, for example, if you can accommodate 50 people on a floor, you know, you may only be able to accommodate 30 people on the floor. So yes, that could have an impact. But on the flip side, you know, owners have realized that working from home is a viable option as well. So, you know, they may not design this workspace for all their 50, you know, folks. They may, you know, design it for, you know, just the 30 people, and you know, have give people the option of rotating in and out of the office, and, you know, giving them more flexible working environments. So, you know, you know, it could have an impact. On the other end, you know, it could be compensated by, you know, requiring less space, or having, you know, lesser workers come to the office. So I wish I could have a, you know, a right or wrong answer to that question, but, you know, it's a fluid situation right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And for the, please feel free to look at the questions and see anything that, you know, jumps out to you. But I'm just seeing another question for Omur. As he's asking, given the considerable impact of new social distancing regulations and initiatives on production output on sites, how has your approach to scheduling and work plans changed with projects running at a lower capacity, projects starting back up, and how do you think will be impact going forward? You kind of mentioned, Omur, but can you recap that for us again? Because you mentioned about how scheduling changing and...
Yes, and again, we're on our 5th week going back to construction with these restricted rules. We're learning it as we day. Again, we have impacted with the productivity, obviously. And then because we have staggered start, and we have some areas that we cannot do with the crew sizes that we normally have because of the social distancing areas. So we've been evaluating the productivity loss, and we're trying to accommodate that with the staggering starts, and then with this multiple shifts, so we can keep our schedules. Obviously, because of the labor agreements that we have, any time that you work on second shift or a third shift or overtime, it adds a cost to the construction because of the labor agreements. But there's some incentives that we got and concessions from the labor side also, that they're also lowering their costs to keep the construction costs as is, as we are initiating all of these the new work rules. But it's a fluent thing. We're learning as we go, but it's obvious that the productivity is going to be impacted, and we're still trying to find out a way to mitigate that.
So I have another question here. This is to you, but I think to everyone really. It's kind of comparing to Asia and Europe, or comparing to North America. You know, how other countries dealt with COVID-19 and what measurements they may have taken already to keep construction sites running safely, besides the ones you described during the presentation, or if you know of how other
Well,
countries.
we have jobs in Asia, in Malaysia, and then we have jobs in Dubai. We've been in touch with them mainly, and then we're collaborating. And most of the mitigations that we're implementing in New York City are coordinated with them, and then they're aligned with the other workers also. But some of the jobs in other countries, again, the New York construction is very unique because we build high rises. And then the footprint of the building is very small. We do not have areas to store materials. I mean, during this pandemic, the material availability is another problem that, you know, since the customs are closed and then some of the factories overseas are closed, we cannot get the materials. In some of the areas in Asia, they were able to order these materials and then able to store them on site. So that the construction is not affected as much as we have it here in New York.
Yeah, and if I can add to it, I think the U.S. construction, is slightly different from, the way construction is managed in, let's say, some of the Asian countries. There's a lot more dependence on equipment and technology here in the U.S. As compared to some of the other Asian countries where it's more labor intensive. So some of the lessons learned from them may not be applicable to our market, and we may be ahead of some of the other countries in the sense that we can use technology and advanced equipment, construction equipment and machinery to our advantage that some of the Asian countries may not be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. So we have only a couple minutes left. Would you guys like to give a last minute thought? What is to expect in short term, long term? Any pointers from you guys as a final thought? Alessandro, would you like to go?
Yeah, I will try to say just this one. I keep reinforcing the concept that we should not work with COVID in mind, because we are definitely going to go out of this crisis. It's a temporary thing, and hopefully it will be relatively soon. When I'm talking relatively soon, of course, I'm not talking about end of the year, but even if it extends toward the first half of the 2021. I think that for most of the industry, it's a viable solution in the meantime to work partially from home and partially going back to the office wherever applicable and in safety. It's important moving forward that we already start planning for the future, and we put the COVID issue, which is very limited in time and as a task, aside. The real estate industry will have to learn to work towards a more flexible type of contract, more flexible type of building that can accommodate change. And regarding the workplace of the future, we also know whether we really have to make an upskill our building and the offering of the workplace, because ultimately the workplace will have to be more of a destination and one of the essential tools to really retain and attract new talent, because it will be a little bit like a university where people go to socialize, to learn, to be mentored and to mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, some of the closing remarks is this COVID situation certainly has been a big disruptor to the industry, and it has posed a lot of challenges to the industry. We went through phases. I think the first phase was just responding to the situation with what was happening. So it had an impact. It had a high impact where construction was banned and a lot of activities were stopped. That was a response stage. Now I think we are in the sustain stage where we are sustaining what we have and trying to get the projects up and running and get moving. For example, at certain stage we are going to be in the recovered stage where, you know, we will recover from this, we will move forward with this. There's going to be some, you know, short-term impacts on cost side of things, on productivity side of things. There's going to be some long-term impacts on, you know, I think Omar brought up a great point on supply chain disruption. So, you know, there's a lot of supply chain that was coming in, you know, from, certain parts of the world, and you know, a lot of the construction industry was hedging their risks and bets on, you know, a small number of, area of the world, which on the long term is going to change. You know, people will hedge their bets and hedge their risk and move production of materials and equipment and spread them out so that, you know, they're not severely impacted should such a situation arise again.
I'll add my closing remarks, and is like, I think it's obvious that construction is affected just like all other businesses. But I think what the next is for construction is we realize that it's so labor dependent. Our industry is so labor dependent, and if you cannot have the laborers on site, nothing will be constructed. I think we're going to see a lot more trend to eliminate the labor force on the construction site, and then investment on other technologies so we can eliminate the waste and eliminate the inefficiencies in the construction site, like coming up with the pre-construction or robotic systems or any other technologies that would eliminate the labor force so we're not dependent on the people on the construction sites.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. I think you guys bring very different point of views to how we are dealing with COVID and to come in the future. I personally think we are so lucky to be witnessing this as a lifetime opportunity. I think this is a moment in history, and a lot of innovation will come out of this, and hopefully we will be part of that. Thank you again for your time and sharing your thoughts and presentation. I think this will be the end of presentation. Thank you to our attendees for spending the time to listen to us. Please continue to send your questions. We will post this video on YouTube, and I think that will be all. Unless, Tanya, if you go back to our presentation. It's wrapping up. Okay. I think that will be the end of our presentation. Thank you all again. Looking forward to the next event.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody.
Thanks for having us.